Welcome back to the second episode of our 8-day anniversary special of Around the Verse. Today we are celebrating Aegis Dynamics. I'm Sandi Gardiner.
And I'm Chris Roberts. At one point, Aegis Dynamics was considered the apex of military spacecraft. Their Retaliator bombers and Gladius fighters were heavily involved in the First Tavaran War and made an impression on a young officer named Ivar Messar, who would go on to establish himself as the first imperator of the United Empire of Earth. Aegis was so closely tied with the Messar family that when people finally rose up and overthrew them, the company was equally blamed for centuries of terror and corruption. On the outs with the government, Aegis focused their attention on the civilian market with the conversion of the Avenger and the introduction of the Reclaimer salvage ship. It was a strategy that paid off. It wasn't long before Aegis was able to re-establish their reputation and become a military contractor once again. Today, their ships comprise a significant portion of the Navy's fleet. The likes of the Gladius, Sabre, Retaliator, Vanguard, Idris, and Javelin, common sights amongst the front lines.
Since we introduced the Anvil Hawk yesterday, we thought it would only be fair if we let Aegis retaliate with a new ship of their own, the Hammerhead.
Retaliator.
That's a pun.
Let's go to Jackson McCleary, who has a very special episode of Galactic Tour for us.
Woohoo!
Everyone enjoys stories about daring naval pilots flying for our freedom and battle-hardened captains leading the charge. But for every Cal Mason and Admiral Bishop out there blowing things up, there are dozens of unsung heroes who are just as worthy of our praise and admiration. And today, here at Conrad Naval Station, Galactic Tour is going to sing an unsung song. Meet Gunner's mate, Alfonso Lang. A master craftsman in his own right, Starman Lang is in charge of lovingly caring for the deadly armament aboard the UEES Thresher. Every day they're not getting shot at, Alfonso EVAs across the entirety of this 100-metre-long Aegis Hammerhead to visually inspect the dozens of guns and missile launchers that make this patrol ship such a formidable foe. Optics, targeting systems, mount connections, head threading, even lubrication levels all must be checked, rechecked, and meticulously maintained. Basically, all the worst parts of operating really big and powerful guns. It's like if you wanted an elephant for a pet, Alfonso would be the guy go, yeah, that's great, but what the hell are you going to feed it? With the aid of advanced diagnostic tools, each of the turrets must be correctly calibrated, so that when the gunners fire at a swift-moving target, say a squad of fighters or an incoming torpedo, they actually shoot it down instead of the gun jamming and blowing up in their face. If the Aegis Hammerhead is a sleek shark patrolling the dangerous waters, then Alfonso is the remora stuck to its armoured belly, making sure this dangerous predator stays that way. And I, for one, am damn glad to know he's there. Starman Lang, we here at Galactic Tour salute you. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be a human torpedo, well, my friend, wonder no more.
Thanks, Jack. That was great. With the UEE's recent push for militias to shoulder more of the burden of protecting the Empire, there's been a big demand for light, fast patrol ships. Whether it's hunting a pack of outlaws or a Vandal attack squad, the Aegis Hammerhead is ideally suited to the task.
Let's take a look at what it took to bring the Hammerhead to you.
So the Hammerhead is a new ship from Aegis. Basically, it's their new sort of gunboat. It's a patrol ship. It's basically, if you have it as part of a group, it's kind of like, it'll be like the vanguard of your fleet. It'll be there to sort of bust through the enemy's defences. And the beauty of this ship is basically it's just bristling with turrets. So it's got 6-man turrets, 2 unmanned turrets. So if you've got that in your fleet, then, it's something of massive firepower. So looking forward to this in the game. Obviously, this is the Aegis manufacturer. You know, people are familiar with all the other ships we've done, you know, the Retaliator, the Javelin, the Idris. So the Hammerhead is, it's about 100 meters long, something like that. We've taken styling from both the Retaliator size ship and also from some parts from the Javelin and melded them together. We've had a lot of time already with Aegis, and you know, there's a sort of level of design theory that we expect to go into this, and so it's been basically sort of taking all those things we know, advancing it, and sort of putting it onto this new ship, and sort of working with the title of the ship, which is the Hammerhead, and basically sort of working with that and working with, you know, sort of reference from obviously hammerhead sharks, you know, that, you know, you've got to look at that, actual hammerheads, and really just sort of coming up with a sort of unique ship that will give hopefully sort of an intimidating silhouette, and that's the main theory. And so it's been a lot of fun. I've sort of been working with Gavin Rothery for quite some time on this, and hopefully fans will get to see the sort of progression of this ship. And you know, it's gone through quite a lot of iterations. We probably did sort of seven or eight variants where, you know, we tried sort of traditional blockade runner style hammerhead ships. So we, you know, wanted to sort of push it in a more Star Citizen way, something that was unique to us. And pretty much, you know, from very early on, you know, we had the sort of negative space inside it. So, and that has sort of been a feature of the ship as we've gone along. And it's gone through ups and downs. You know, there are some that are less good, some that kind of, it turned into like some kind of space shrimp or something. You know, then we veered back towards the Hammerhead, and then a couple of functionality tweaks and a lot of sketching and drawing, and eventually came up with something that we were happy with, Chris was happy with, and hopefully the fans will be happy with too.
We've got a few guys currently working on the exterior. There's someone looking at the engines, and we've got someone working on turrets, and then someone else is working on the hull specifically. We've reused some shaders that we already had on other Aegis ships that we knew would work well on this ship, and we're currently going through the process of effectively tracing over the concept mesh, which is way too expensive to use in engine. So we kind of have that as our base and then trace over that. And at the moment, the guys are kind of going through detailing up the mesh and applying the shaders that we already have, so we can kind of get a quick result in engine, so people can kind of review it at that point.
So the weaponry on this is you know, is quite formidable. You've got 6 turrets, 6-man turrets, with excellent coverage. Each of those turrets has 4 guns on them. You also have 2 unmanned turrets, and then there are also 4 missile pods, basically 2 on the top that pop up and 2 on the underneath that pop down, I guess. And I think that's in total 32 missiles, S3 missiles.
It's effectively kind of extra firepower for larger capital ships. This thing's basically just a floating collection of turrets and weapons. You wouldn't want to see one of these coming at you, basically. The turrets on the side have full motion in all directions, so and they're mounted on 4 arms to the sides of the ship, so it gets kind of good coverage of firepower.
The interior of the Hammerhead, you would see a lot of familiar things because we've used elements from pre-existing kits from the Aegis manufacturer. We've done tweak on colour schemes. You know, it's just generally darker, a little more imposing. But there are key rooms which are unique. So you've got the Hammerhead, which is basically filled with these hydraulic rams on the interior, which you can see they're exposed. We kind of just sort of wanted to hint at that sort of feeling of maybe it could take a good hit. We don't have that gameplay, but still thought it was a really strong feature. And also within the head is basically the docking collar. And underneath that is the bridge, basically. So that's kind of another unique feature. The bridge is actually, you know, when you're going to be looking out, you're going to have the head above you. So it's going to give it quite a unique feeling.
You have captain's quarters, which is solely just for him, where he'll reside. He'll have his own bed, his own shower, his own toilet. Then you have the crew quarters, which will be for 7 people. as well as a co-pilot's separate room. You have a small mess hall where they can go for food, because when they're on the ship, they're there for months, stretches at a time, so they need to be able to sustain themselves. There's a cargo room that can, I think, 5 meter square area-ish. There's hallways leading to where the turrets go as well, engineering consoles, things like that.
I mean, obviously it's going to be cool because you're going to be coming into dock and you're going to be right there. It's going to be right in front of you and stuff. The other areas are basically the sort of the cargo room, which basically is just on 4 massive, well, I'd say medium-sized hydraulic rams, and they lower down, and they can hold a good amount of cargo. They can also hold a rover. That was one of the requirements, just managed to squeeze them in. And then that's also sort of combined with some of the sort of exposed engineering, because the engines are essentially on either side of that room. And there's a small sort of cubby hole basically for the mechanic. And hopefully, I think it will give quite a nice experience, because you'll be sort of tucked away in there, but you'll also have good coverage of your cargo room. And also that leads to one of the rear turrets. So it's quite a nice vantage point. My favourite features, I think, there's a lot of good stuff. I think overall probably is the Hammerhead and just the sort of the silhouette of the ship, how it's all come together. I think it's really well designed. I think that's probably my favourite part of it, aesthetically. But in terms of functionality, one of the things that the turrets needed to do is basically have really good sort of coverage in any angle. So we had to come up with a system where players can get into it, and then it then sort of moves away slightly from the body to give extra manoeuvrability. So the fans and players pretty much have really good coverage from any direction. And so we've achieved that. And I think it's just, obviously Star Citizen, we always have a lot of things that we've got to take into account. Gameplay, what fans want to see, bunk rooms and all those kind of things, captain's room and stuff. And it's just a matter of approaching it logically. Obviously this is not our first ship. But with Gavin, it was our sort of first big ship in terms of like from start to finish, full turnkey. So just sort of working on different layouts in terms of flow, and getting the cargo room in there basically, and making sure it can hold stuff like, say, a rover, and just taking into account all those sort of small things. So for me, it's more of it's not so much one thing. It's the sum of everything. It's the sum of all those things basically that has come together, because it's been quite a journey. And so the fact that we've been able to hit all those targets and still the ship remain aesthetically in the sort of direction that I wanted, I think that's probably most what I'm happy with.
Visit our website for more information on the Hammerhead and download a brochure. Aegis Dynamics' full lineup, including some of their limited ships, are all available for sale from now until December 4, with a 1-week extension on the Hammerhead until December 11. And we know the Idris and Javelins are popular, so please look at the schedule for the time slots.
So besides the Hammerhead, we have some updates to share on the Reclaimer and the Javelin. Let's check in with Jared, our artists and designers for ShipShape, to see where these ships are in the production pipeline.
ShipShape.
Aegis Dynamics. From the sleek lines and muted colors of its fighter craft to the awe-inspiring scale of its capital ships, Aegis, a brand with history in the Star Citizen universe going all the way back to the First Tevaran War, is not one to go quietly into the night, or allow itself to be easily supplanted by relative newcomers like Anvil or Misk. With 21 ships and their variants already making their way through the universe and more on the way, chances are you'll step foot into an Aegis Dynamics ship at some point in your Star Citizen career. Whether it's the nimble Gladius, the tried and true Avenger, the sleek and powerful Saber, or the devastating Retaliator, there are more Aegis ships than you can shake a stick at, if you're into that sort of thing. On today's episode of ShipShape, I'm excited to check in with some of the ship team working on a ship that's been my personal favorite since the moment it was first introduced, the Aegis Reclaimer. Let's take a look.
The Reclaimer, it's a salvage ship that's used for going out and scavenging. It reclaims ships that have been damaged or destroyed because it has a giant claw underneath that's got lasers on, and it cuts up the material and all gets sucked in through a vacuum inside, which can then get processed. It's got a drone bay at the top of it, so it's got these hatches that will open out, and you just have player-controlled drones that will fly out from there, which can then go to help salvage parts of the ships.
I would expect the Reclaimers, so you and your friend might get intel on where the latest conflicts happened, and you rock up, and the ship's fairly tough, but it's not a combat ship, so it can probably go in fairly aggressive space, but then when it gets there, its role is effectively just to clear up. It's like a giant space hoover, is the idea, yeah. And I expect people will have fun just hunting and exploring, looking for things that have salvage value in the universe.
The Reclaimer is very industrial and kind of rugged feeling. So it's an Aegis ship, and we take a lot of cues and art styles from other Aegis ships, but we've remixed it, I guess you could say. So we looked at a lot of industrial spaces, like old factories or old kind of steel mills, that kind of thing. And we also drew a lot of inspiration from like Alien, from the Nostromo. So you'll see a lot of cues to the Nostromo in there. That kind of built the style of the Reclaimer. So yeah, it's a bit more rugged and industrial, and you'll notice it feels a little bit more lived in, a little bit less clinical than some of the other ships. It was good fun, just trying to work out that whole system of how it goes from floating around in space to being processed and passed into the ship and then stored inside the ship somewhere in a way that actually makes sense from point A to point B. That was quite a challenge, but it's quite a fun thing to work on. Kind of excited to see it actually working in its final form as well.
The actual arm itself is player controlled, though, the big claw. That person sits next to the pilot in the bridge, and you just, from the bridge, it's all glass windows everywhere, and you just see the arm shooting out underneath, and that's how the player controls it. They just see it and eyeball it, so it's quite impressive. We've got seats at the side that the player gets into, and then it's just like a little mini cockpit. But the actual barrel, they're in like a barrel, and it rotates while they're in it. So while the turrets are moving up and down, those seats will rotate dependent on what they're pointing at. So when everything is moving and working, you just see these players either side of you spinning, and there's smoke going off everywhere. It's really cool.
When I started on the Reclaimer, the first room that I blocked out was the escape pod room. And we used this room to kind of get across the feeling we wanted to kind of carry through on the rest of the rooms we worked on the ship. So we took that and we pushed it all the way to final as one of the first assets on board the ship. And it's full of machinery and pipes, cabling and greebles. And the lighting's kind of cold and atmospheric and dusty, and you should feel the machinery whirring. And then after I'd finished that space, I worked on the connecting corridors, which is this step-down stairway where you can look through down to the processing room. Obviously, when I was working on this space, the processing room wasn't complete, so it was just a void. But now you should be able to walk down, and below you you'll have the refinery process, and you might see metal and things whirring. After the stairwell, you head down into the tech corridors. The tech corridors are the space that is designated for the computer systems and the servers and basically all the plumbing and wiring for the center of the ship. And this is very much the core where all the kind of systems and machinery are controlled from. And from there, you have the central drone room. We have 3 drones that are able to be player controlled in order to go out and collect salvage and bring it back to the Reclaimer's machines and process. And from there you have 2 control booths and the racks and mechanisms for maintaining your drones and repairing them and keeping them all in order. I suppose they're designed to feel quite cold and industrial, but I've left kind of little kind of comfy corners in places so that it feels kind of cozy. Like the control booth has got 2 big comfy chairs and it's quite isolated, and then you go out into the actual drone room and it's quite open and and exposed. And it's the same with other areas on the ship. It's supposed to be kind of like a big nest, effectively. And you might find a little area where you can kind of drop down, have your cup of coffee or whatever, and then back to it.
The first room that I worked on was the processing room, which is kind of like the trash compactor from Star Wars, but we've thrown in big, huge spinning blades in there as well, just to help crush it up. So it's basically a big, noisy room that's really sweaty and grimy, and it's just got huge blades spinning, churning metal up. It was actually really fun to work from because it was one of the few pieces of interior work that we had concept for. So it was nice to see somebody's interpretation of it and then just put your own spin on it. It's got a huge door at the back where all the scrap metal gets processed through. And it's cool seeing all the lights spinning off and that door opening up. And it's filthy. There are some creature comforts in the ship. It's not all an industrial workspace. So the area that I was working on specifically was the habitation area for all the crew and the captain. So you will see more kind of softer elements. So you'll see lots of padding on the walls. The crew have their own sleeping area and, you know, their own bathroom, their own kind of chill out area as well. So it's not all industrial, but we tried to break the ship down into zones. So you have a habitation area, a technical area and engineering areas, and all of them are kind of quite distinct. And that also actually helps the player with signposting throughout the ship. So I know a criticism of previous ships was that people would find it very hard to navigate around in them. So that's something that we tried to fix from the very beginning, in that the layout made sense and you could find your way around without getting lost. I worked on the engineering deck as well. That's where the engine's power comes from. That's another sweaty area full of chains, and drew a lot of inspiration from Alien, the Nostromo in this. The whole ship really is very Nostromo themed. But yeah, that room's got this floating there's a floating walkway through this room, and it circles around the engine component, and it just feels it's full of smoke and fog.
I think my favourite bits have been the kind of smaller rooms, like the little kind of spaces that wouldn't normally have that much attention, but I've gone and put a little bit more effort into those areas because I think it's quite cool for the context of the ship to have like almost the little things like the broom cupboard are totally filled out with detail and little monitors and machines, and you'll probably hear whirring and tinkering as you go in there, and everything kind of looks like it's got a function and a kind of reason behind it.
There's a captain's quarters where he's separated from everyone else with his own little office and bedroom and very swanky. And across the way from him, you've got the crew quarters, which holds 6 people. They've got their own bathroom. And then there's a mess hall as well, which again is very similar to the one from Alien, where it's just a table that curves around and people just sit around it, and it's sunk into the floor a little bit. While I also did the habitation area, I also did the cockpit. And the cockpits are easily the most challenging area of the ships. The rest of the ship is kind of simple in a way. As soon as you get to the cockpit, there's so many different systems and departments that become dependent on each other in a very small area. So getting the cockpit right was probably one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the things I'm most proud of that I worked on the ship. The challenges are basically making sure that the player has good visibility from the cockpit windows, making sure that the enter and exit animations work correctly with animation sets that we already have, so we don't have to make new ones, setting up the whole dashboard so that you have all the UI there and it's all readable and legible on screen and laid out in a way that makes sense. So there's a lot of elements come together in a very small space.
A lot of the challenge with the ships with Aegis in general is that we have a lot of running curves and shapes that are kind of consistent. They carefully run into one another and meet up neatly, and this kind of makes the art kind of feel quite cohesive. But it does mean that when you're working with assets that connect together in like a modular sort of fashion, you have to make sure that this piece will connect onto all the other pieces and be reusable, but yet you want all the edges and lines to kind of connect up neatly together. And some of the spaces in the Reclaimer are a little bit awkward in some respects, so it's a bit of a challenge getting all the modular pieces to connect together nicely.
Working on the Reclaimer was the most fun ship that I've worked on so far, definitely. We've got our pipeline to a point now where everyone knows what they're doing. They know what the the quality standards are. And now it's at a point where there's not really many question marks when we start on a ship, unless there's a new gameplay mechanic in there that we haven't looked at before. So it's just a case of just making really cool artwork. And in the past, some of the ships, the layout might have caused issues for the player. So once we knew that we had the layout right, we knew exactly how we were going to approach the art, and just making it was good fun, really. I think everyone who worked on the ship really enjoyed it from an art perspective.
With an iconic look from renowned concept artist George Hull, I'm looking at you, Blade Runner, the Aegis Reclaimer has been tearing its way through the ship pipeline. I'm not the pun guy. And has now completed the entirety of Greybox and begun its journey through the final art phase, where it's currently in the tech setup stages. Now, we've got a fair amount of work to do, but we've never been closer to the Reclaimer becoming a reality in the Star Citizen universe. And my days of dive bombing down to a moon surface and snatching someone up with its claw are soon at hand. Citizens beware. Now, the Reclaimer is a big ship with an imposing presence, to be certain. But few ships have the awe-inspiring physicality of the Aegis Javelin Destroyer. Destroyer of, well, a lot. Let's check in with some of the team working on this massive addition to Star Citizen and Squadron 42.
So the Javelin is a destroyer class capital ship. In a spectrum of capital ships in the universe, it's actually not the biggest one. There's a couple of them above. This one is supposed to be the fast kind of search and destroy class of ship. It's made by Aegis for UEE. So the idea behind a Javelin Destroyer, this is ship for large groups of players, to probably even do a bit, like inner guild, inner clan combat. It's almost like in, let's say, a medieval MMO. That would be your castle. It's incredibly expensive to run. It's very expensive to outfit. It's quite complex to fly properly. It's definitely very, very expensive to lose. So it's going to be a ship that's being taken out by groups of players for those important tasks, or for the more kind of risky and funs of gambling and excitement. Maybe this is something you want to do and give it a go and see how you fare against maybe another fleet, and see who comes. Who's going to be victorious? Well, one of that sides is probably going to lose their ship, but that's actually quite fun.
The total length is 470 meters roughly. It's a double size as Aegis, which is like a aircraft carrier, which can carry more and more crew members. So the ship is being divided by 3 different decks, like a habitation area, technical area, combat, and engineering area. I think my main focus on the habitation area, which is including the living quarters and the mess hall, and also the corridor area, medical bay. All these areas is quite, including with the military style. So, and also will give the people more feeling like cozy. You can find some of the entertainment, even like air hockey table in the mess hall area, like the arcade machine, some of this stuff. So this is basically what we have that, and also we need to make those area have a quite consistent style and much more clean and softness. There's a lot of gameplay contents in the interior level. This ship just like a small town, so you can have a lot of different funny things in the ship. So you can even like a large fancy phantom windows. The lift can view the whole universe. It's not really a multi-purpose ship like some of or pretty much most of the ships in Squadron 42 or Persistent Universe in Star Citizen. It's a destroyer, as the name implies.
it has size 12 torpedo tubes on the front of the ship. The biggest torpedoes you can experience in the game. This is a ship designed to find other capital ships and do what it needs to do. It also has an array of manned anti-aircraft turrets, and it also has a contingent of marines and a dropship that it's basically just for Javelin's use, which can be used for initiating boarding actions, and also it can receive small deliveries if the launching pad is empty. You can land a small transport ship and resupply the ship with like ammunition and stuff like that, which is gonna be quite cool, I think. So the whole process of Javelin followed fairly closely Idris. So Idris was the first capital ship created by us. Idris kind of set the style, the visual style of the Aegis capital ships. It created first pools of modules we can build rooms and corridors out of. And I was given a task of taking this small pool and this style and basically expand it on a ship that's much bigger. So build the first rooms out of what's already there, and then whatever kind of holes you are left with, fill it with something new. So we can kind of, instead of rebuilding stuff from scratch, you pretty much expand on what's already there. The layout of the ship was set by the original concept artists very long time ago. It has to change quite drastically. Not a lot of stuff was left in place. I'm pretty sure only like the cargo hold and the hangar and the general what kind of rooms are actually on board was left intact. But once we built what was concepted and started running inside of it, it didn't feel right. The corridors were super long. It didn't create a nice kind of gameplay loops. It was probably way too easy to defend. It wasn't interesting enough to run around, and it was a little bit confusing. So there was another pass over the interior of the ship, where we created a little bit more game-like interior, sacrificed the realism and efficiency. Like, they probably wouldn't build this ship exactly like that when it was a real ship, but realism is very often an enemy of fun, so you have to kind of spice things up a little bit from time to time. We built that again. It was a little bit better, but because we created few more corridors, we created few more areas of interest, the total length of corridors in the ship became very long. By fixing one problem, we kind of introduced another problem, which was you never really knew where you were on the ship. There were so many corridors, so many similar corners, so many similar locations that it was a little bit. I was getting confused. I didn't know where I was, and I built the thing. So we kind of went in between. We made some of the corridors shorter. We reduced the amount of corners you have to take. We made some other corridors a little bit longer, not as long as in the original concept, but just kind of long enough. And then last thing we've done, we tried to make sure, even if the corridors are on the same deck and are using the same modules, at the most extreme corridors on the port and the starboard of the ship, we introduced windows that weren't there originally. First of all, it's a very nice visual thing. You can see so much stuff. When you can see outside, and you can see all the vistas we're creating and everything. It looks really cool. And then also now you know, if you have a window in this corridor, you kind of know where you are on the ship. And then if you closer to the center, we also started introducing different kind of guidelines and like the kind of signposting and stuff like that. And I think we are in a really good place right now. Obviously, the ship is almost finished, but it's much less confusing than what we kind of struggled with at the beginning.
The main thing that kind of really differentiates it is probably the amount of space we had to play with in doing it. So we could literally have a whole industrial deck. So you'll have a deck where there's all the engineering components, everything that you would think about what needs to get the ship running. It's all on one deck. We've got a habitation zone, so there's literally, it's kind of set out in much of a compartmental way. So you would generally have all your habitational stuff is in one area, all your industrial engineering stuff is in another. You've got the bridge, which has got all your ship computers and everything running in the back. And it's just really nice that we've been able to have such a big area to play around with and make everything make sense rather than shoehorning things in.
The ship, because it's quite big, we had to make different visual kind of cues for every deck. So we have the engineering deck at the bottom. You have a living quarters and kind of like the most populated deck, which is the middle deck, which is more of like a lived-in area where you have a lot of kind of leathery pillows, and it seems like much safer and nicer place to be. We called the set. The module set for it, we called it Zen, so it's like nice, and you know, you would want to be there. Obviously, zero gravity, you need some safety stuff like that. And you have top deck, which is like a technical deck where all your avionics, electronics, where all your control rooms, like the captain quarters, the armory, all those kind of rooms are. And then obviously you have a bridge at the very, very top. And every one of those areas has a fairly distinctive style, but they kind of work together as an Aegis. So there aren't really elements you would see like the most biggest building blocks. This is stuff that you will also see on Idris. The accent beams, how the angles and how the chamfers are being sorted. But I think it has its own kind of distinctive style. And I think it looks really nice. I have more room around corridors and rooms to actually start making art and giving some depth. We had to figure out a few aspects like the size of the hangar had to get bigger because there wasn't like enough room there was enough room for Redeemer, but there are other drop ships in a game like the Hoplite. And there wasn't enough room when it landed. It's a little bit bigger when it landed. There wasn't really enough room for players to walk around, so we had to actually take that into consideration, which pushed on other things, and it was kind of like that. So first 6 months was just making sense out of the layout. In that process, the ship grew quite a lot, but from that point on, it was just I kind of understand the ship. I understood the process. I could start creating art, and that's when it kind of bloomed for me. And I'm quite happy with how it turns out, and quite proud by actually making this ship sensical. Obviously, it wasn't all me; it was the whole team effort. Once the first kind of foundations were laid out, other team members came in. It was between from 2 to I think like at the peak we had like 9 artists working over a couple of weeks, especially on the bridge and other areas. So obviously there is like my input at that point was like I was just a part of the team, but like I think the whole team made amazing work with the whole ship, and I'm quite excited for everyone to see what we've done with it.
We've spent a lot of time going back and forth with art and basically saying, you know, if this section of the ship goes down, we need to be able to close doors here. If we lose oxygen in this room, we need to shut that off. And it's been a lot of back and forth, but yeah, it's really making it into an actual functioning ship over just some art that's been put together.
Yes, I'm really proud actually with the exterior, because it is another huge ship. So having any kind of high level of detail across a mesh that's that big is always a challenge. But I think with the pipeline that we have and the way that we've approached it, I think it kind of holds up really well, even quite close up. So and I do actually really like the design of the Javelin exterior with the kind of 2 forks at the front of the ship. Yeah, so one of the coolest parts of the Javelin exterior is the large turret on the top and the bottom of the ship. It kind of runs along the spine of the ship, and when they're not in use, they tuck away to the back of the ship. So when these systems come online, you see the turrets actually move along the track to kind of, you know, take down targets. And that's one of the coolest features on the exterior.
On the art production side, I think the production pipeline, we focus to especially like create the interior. You know, this ship is quite huge and large. What we think about is how to build the ship fast, decent. So we just create like a modular access library. We create a different variation modular access piece. You can just like building a house to make the different combination. We have a standard one, like a wall, ceiling, floor, so we can have a lot of different materials, so can combine each other, even like create a longer, you can expand the room larger and make the room smaller. So that's what we call the modular assets library.
The type of player who's going to use this is somebody who was lucky enough to buy one of the limited ones that we sold, to be honest. It's somebody who wants to really be part of the verse. They want to be one of these few owners of this enormous gargantuan ship, and the kind of person who wants to work with a crew, the kind of person who wants to employ people on board and really make it feel as though they're living and breathing in the verse and not just tootling around in their own little ship. It's, you know, managing a crew and going on huge missions and huge missions, basically. I'd say it's easily one of the most interesting things I've ever had to work on, because just the scale of it and just the complexity of what you have to think about, because you're kind of designing your own little world inside a ship rather than just a ship that functions into stuff, because there's so much going on. You have to think about how this gets impacted by other players working alongside you while you're the owner of this ship. And yeah, it's been really interesting to work on.
That's a big boat. It probably goes without saying, but capital ships the scale of vessels like the Javelin and the Idris, with fully featured interiors as detailed as any location found in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, take a fair bit of time to bring to their full realization. That said, I'm proud to announce that the Aegis Javelin is currently in final art phase. And when I say that, I mean all of final art phase. Due to the Javelin's enormous size and complexity, various parts of it are actually in many individual stages at once. What that means is, I can pretty much light up all the boxes on this one. Festive. With that, this episode of Shipshape comes to a close. But I'll be right back here tomorrow with a look at the continuing development of our alien ships and ground vehicles. And don't forget, if you haven't already, you can take the Observer test that's currently up on the RSI website. It's your chance to win the brand new bounty hunting ship, the Anvil Hawk. It's no purchase necessary, and the full rules are there on the website for those of you who are interested. For Shipshape, I'm Community Content Manager Jared Huckabee. Back to you, Chris and Sandy.
So both the Reclaimer and the Javelin are looking great. And if you're wondering about the Idris, we'll give you an update in the holiday live stream, as it's prominently featured in the Squadron 42 gameplay reveal.
Exciting. I look forward to that. That's it from Aegis Dynamics for Day 2. Be sure to check out our store to receive 20% off all merchandise until December 4th. And of course, thanks to all of our backers and subscribers for your ongoing support of Star Citizen. Don't forget.
Thank you.
Yes, don't forget we have a special happy hour coming this Friday to celebrate all of us and have you vote to create a brand new Drake ship to go into Star Citizen.
So tune in tomorrow for our next ATV special, where we'll take a look at some of our alien ships and ground vehicles. But until then, we'll see you
around the verse. Ready? Two hammerheads and a hawk in a pear tree.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.